Cheryl Ganz for several years. I've worked with her very closely in the Postal Museum. She is a leader of women in philately. She was the first female collector accepted to the Chicago Collectors Club. She's been the president of the American Airmail Society. She's currently chief curator of the Smithsonian National Postal Museum. She has award-winning exhibits. Those twins, you were and she asked me to keep it very, very short. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Cheryl Ganz.
Thank you all for coming. Kind of nice to realize that I broke the record for this, because I realized this is not a cheap and at the same time I realized this is an important cause, and so it's very meaningful to me that you're all here. I've got about 20 minutes unless I start to ramble, in which case I've already got the guy over there ready to give me a signal. Two of them, okay. Tell him your friends are right. So I hope you enjoy what I'm going to talk about. I'm not doing funny stories, but rather kind of giving my philosophy about where we're at in life and how. I don't know how many of you saw this movie, Midnight in Paris. It's about a writer who goes back in time travels, to what he believes is the golden age of literature in Paris, the 1920s. He meets all the famous writers that he's dreamt about and who can inspire him. And he has incredible experiences. And of course, it's a journey movie. At the same time, he has a journey about his own life. And so it set me to thinking, he's looking for the golden age of literature. What is the golden age of philately? I think it's a good question. There are a lot of people who would immediately say it's the classic period. Of course, that's when stamps began. We've got beautiful, wonderful things. We've got varieties, things to do with them. Just incredible stuff worldwide, so the classics are a natural. And there's some people who say, well, yeah, it's the classic era, but it's not about the stamps. It's about those people who built incredible collections, worldwide rarity collections that can probably never, ever be duplicated. And others would say, including Wayne Youngblood, I don't know if he's here today, I was at his talk today, it's the 1930s, we had an FDR, we had a president, we had more people collecting stamps because of the Great Depression. You could soak your mail, you could do things inexpensively. We just had a groundswell of collecting, and it was so exciting. And yet, I don't know if Randy's here tonight. Randy Neal says it's the 1950s. Because in the 1950s, we went after the young people and we inspired them with the educational value and the excitement of what you could learn with stamp collecting. And so all of these different eras could have been the golden age of philately. But in the movie, what our writer learns is you're living in the golden age. And you can't look back at other time periods as the golden age. You are in it now, and you need to embrace it and understand it and move forward with it. And so what I thought I'd talk a little about tonight are a couple of the things that I see as leading up to why we have the golden age, and what I personally have gone through in the last 40 plus years in this hobby that have helped me realize in my own journey how this is such a golden age for our hobby. So if I think about major changes in the past decades that I've experienced, I look at how diversity has become more visible in our hobby and how we've welcomed it. The fact is, the collecting gene that we have does not discriminate. And if you look at what's been going on in our hobby, more and more, and we still have a long ways to go, more and more The face of philately is becoming the face of America, and I think that's so exciting. Computers and the internet, wow, I don't get my daily eBay fix, I'm shaking it now. You know, how computers have changed this hobby in our lives. I don't know, so you would use the term DIY, but any person under 30 certainly knows what that is. It's in the music world and other places, but we've been doing it even if we don't call it that. We do it ourselves. We collect our own stuff, we organize it, categorize it, research it, write about it, exhibit it, share it, and on and on and on. We are the masters of the do-it-yourself movement. We just never think of it that way. And finally, there's been this huge shift to visual culture. Young people won't look at a document that's just type. You better give them visuals. And the bottom line is our hobby is all about visuals. We have the material already. We just need to figure out how to translate that and have people understand what we have and the joys from it. So the first thing I want to talk a little about is being a woman in the hobby. When I came into the hobby, the women's liberation movement was underway, and I certainly was a believer in it. At the same time, in Chicago and in other cities in the United States, women weren't allowed in certain stamp clubs. And I certainly had that experience. There were dealers who, when you'd walk up to their table, wouldn't show you material, all kinds of issues you would have. And at the same time, I found specialty societies and male mentors who just believed in me and encouraged me and helped me move forward. So this wasn't the prevailing trend. It was maybe a small group, but a small group that made it difficult for women. And if you think of in the women's liberation movement era, women started to come out of college, take jobs, break ceilings. What does that mean? They had discretionary income, they had knowledge and interest, and they were competitive, and they wanted to be part of the action. And the women in this room who are collectors are all part of that, and today we live a very different philatelist life. All we wanted to do was be treated as philatelists, not as citizens. So at one time, we had an organization called Women in Philately. It was an underground movement, no membership list kept. We put out an underground newspaper. Janet was editor, I was president. We did, for those who remember it, we had a few editorials that were rather biting and difficult for some people. As a result of that, one of my editorials eventually led to the Collectors Club of Chicago opening up to her. And we got a wonderful write-up in Lynn's Lawrence after it happened. A lot of great women have been in this hobby, and a lot of us started in show committees. And so up in the upper left is the Chicago Pet Show Committee, one of the early photos of when I was a member of that. In our audience tonight, one of the pioneer, exceptional women. Women like Barbara and Liz Pope broke that glass ceiling to start with, and then when it came time for a larger group of us to come, it made it a lot easier. At the same time, there weren't women mentors out there. That's now happening. Just a couple pictures of some other women who have, within the little fields of they've chosen to specialize in, have broken ground. And today we have the We group. We, instead of like Women in Philately, where we had to try to break the ceiling and gain recognition, We now goes out there and welcomes and mentors new women who feel maybe intimidated walking into a show like this. And so the goal is, let's make this a welcoming place. Next. But it's not just women. We also have other groups. The African Americans in Esper have shown up at shows, supported first days, and really made themselves visible. They have a great journal, doing a lot of good things. Look at the India Study Circle. Those of you who were in Louisville saw a model of how to bring new collectors into our hobby that should be replicated by everybody in any way they can figure out. Just outstanding what they've done. Next. So then now I'm going to go back in time to one of my other fields, and that was literature. I was the youngest member of the APRL International Stamp Show Organizing Committee, and I was in charge of the literature. And there had been a lot of complaints of every literature show at every international, and I did my research, collected all the complaints, and said, okay, I'll just correct all those things. And as a result, set a new standard for how literature exhibitions are done at the international level. I was running the literature at Chicago PEX, and then was able to take a lot of those ideas and chaired a committee with Bob DiViolini, who did Escal, and Russ Gavo, who did Colopex, and wrote the standards of how to do a national show, because in APS, somebody different was reinventing it every year and making all new mistakes every year. The other thing I did in literature, I was a literature judge, and I created the first critique sheet used in the United States, because people who exhibited literature had no idea why they were getting the awards they did. I will say that doing the first critique sheet in America probably is something I shouldn't be proud of, because it criticized itself, but at the time it seemed like the way to go. Thanks. When I was doing literature, we were still working here. This was my tally sheet for all the exhibits coming into the international show. I typed it up on an IBM Selectric and then hand tallied all my numbers, because computers weren't out yet. And so this kind of transition going from the typewriter to computer was huge in our hobby. Next. And in literature is where it became so evident. I'm right now working on an exhibit on China to open up in 2014. So this is a page out of the China Clipper, the China Stamp Society. And from back in the 80s, you can see it's typewritten, hand-drawn lines, ratty illustrations. Next. And then a more recent issue, here we have the do-it-yourself movement. The editor sits down, he takes the typed copy, he formats it, changes fonts, puts in scanned images, and actually can probably print for less than back before when he was trying to photocopy it and send it out. Next. And even more than that, you can't see it so clearly here in this light, but you can go to color now. I mean, for years we had the computer, but then everything was black and white. Now we have the richness of color in our hobby. That's one of the important visuals. And what happens next? With this society, downstairs you can buy a CD that has the entire run of its journal and an index and searchable, and it just has brought this information to anybody who wants it so much easier. Next. Stephen Rod took in the United States Stamp Specialist and did a survey looking at how that journal had changed over time, and it's that same kind of idea, the difference the computers made. And this isn't a very, you can't see this clearly here, but this is a screenshot from the Classic Society. They took their entire journal, put it online, searchable. The bottom line is, we need to have every club putting everything it can online. You start watching the member numbers on clubs and who sponsors new members, it's website, website, website. That is where we have to go. Don't tell me you can't find new people in your club to create a website or do what you need to do with social sites like have a page on Facebook. You aren't going to get those young people if you're not using those sites to talk to them. Next. And then look at how the computers and what's happened with it have brought in analytical philately and the difference that is making. We are just at the beginning stages of some of the most exciting research, whether you like it or not. It's out there and it's going to be used, and we need to embrace all these kind of changes. Next. So now I thought I'd take a little look at exhibitions. I've been on show committees. I'm a show junkie. I exhibit as well and have loved doing that. When I started out in the left side, we took rented tables from the hotel, nailed pieces of wood to the table, then put wooden heavy frames on those with a clamp at the top. We worked all day and rarely got home until 4 in the morning. Then on the right, you can see the standing aluminum frames that were created for Ameripex by Charlie Jenkins, using standardized aluminum pieces, just revolutionized not only how shows looked, how exhibits looked, but how fast we can now set up and take down a show. Really, really changed the whole stamp show. Next. And when I started out, bowling trophies and loving cups. So what you got. And actually, I wish now I had kept a couple, just for fun. But now, this is like what our museum, I designed this Afghan we now give. Now we're getting more practical gifts. I looked at the awards table downstairs. It's like everything there you'd love to have in your home. So it's totally changed how we're receiving awards in our lives. So I thought I'd show you how my exhibits have changed over time. I haven't seen it yet, but it's my understanding there's a one-framer downstairs of an exhibit I did in 1986 on an IBM typewriter that they pulled out of the APS archives. But they would be similar to looking like this. This was an IBM type page where I hand drew with a felt pen my map. And then remember those black arrows that we all use that now you never would put one on a page? So just comparing it to an exhibit page I did last year, I now use a computer, I change my fonts, I import images from the VRS 6000 where I overlap two postmarks to see why one is forged. I zoom in on detail to show how letterings are different for forgeries. So we've totally changed how we can approach presenting our research and our information. Next. So Ken asked me to talk a little about display division. I have all my life collected airmail, especially Zeppelins, and all my life, not only have I collected philately, but I've collected ephemera and artifacts as well. And what I learned when I was a teenager is it's okay to collect it, but you can never exhibit it. Well, you know what? I collected it anyhow. It wasn't only about the exhibit. So then, when I learned display was going to be a division where I could get a medal, and the first time it would ever be eligible was going to be at APS StampShow in Chicago. I thought, I have to do it. But I was writing my dissertation, and I wasn't supposed to do anything except get my job done. Well, I did an 8-frame exhibit, and I put it up, and all my friends in Chicago said, Cheryl, don't get your hopes up. The first year of a new division, they're going to be really tough on everybody. So I got a goal, first time out, and I won Best in Division. And then everybody came up to me at the show and said, yeah, Cheryl, but they'll never give it a grand. It's going to be years before a display can get a grand. And my next time out with the same exhibit, although I must say I reworked almost half of it, my next time out I got the grand, beating out 3 exhibits that had won grands before. So it was possible. But what's important about display class, and it's nothing against traditional classes, because I love that stuff too, we need it all, is that it's a way to bring people in the room. But before that, I want to tell you one quick story about when I first showed this at that first show. Because I wasn't supposed to be doing this, and it was in Chicago. So I go up to Diane and Robert's table, a gathering, just say hi. And lo and behold, while I'm talking to them, up comes Richard and Nancy John. Richard John wrote the book Spreading the News. He was the first reader on my dissertation committee. He comes up to the table, and Diane goes, oh, Richard, have you seen Cheryl's exhibit? And I go, oh boy, and he just hits me with the eye. So I said, well, let me take you over and show you. So I take him over, and I show him my title page, and he's being very stern, and they're reading it. And then all of a sudden, his wife, Nancy, says, Richard, she thinks like you do. And of course, what I did is I took the subject matter, the philately, and I contextualized it by putting it in a historical, economic, and political framework. So yes, I did think like he thought, and I was safe. I wasn't going to get punished for that. Yes. But what I did have in there, well, that's my first ribbon for a display division goal. What I did put in that exhibit, including a lot of timetables and menus and fun stuff, is I put a fork that was pulled out of the wreckage of the crashed Hindenburg. And there was one writer in our hobby, a classic type collector, who just thought this was like the worst thing you could ever do, was put a fork in an exhibit. And for 2 years, he kept writing in his columns about, I just can't believe that there's a fork in an exhibit. Well, he did me the biggest favor in the world, because every time I went to a show, people would come up and say, "Can I see the fork?" And I'd take them over and show them the fork. But here's what happens with display class. They go over to see that big showy stuff, but they stay to learn about the philately. And that's the key to how display class connects to people's lives and draws them in to see philately as they've never seen it before. As a curator, I always like to say, I design my exhibit so that when you first start to look at an exhibit, you get all wrapped up in the story, and then all of a sudden you go, I'm in a stamp exhibit. You know, we've got to get them in to look at it first, and display class is one way to do that. Next. So, I did want to say not everything has changed in 40 years. Judges are still highly criticized. In this case, Clyde and I were getting a hard time at a stamp show as judges. But the other thing that hasn't changed is we're still having fun. And we got to keep having fun. That's key in the how. Next. Then finally, I wanted to talk a little about the new William H. Gross Stamp Gallery. The world's largest postage stamp gallery is going to open September 22nd. Not only will it be the world's largest stamp gallery, it's the first time that stamps are going to be treated like museum objects in other kinds of museums and put in a contextual framework that tells stories that people can connect to, so that they're not coming to look at postage stamps. They're coming to learn about history and world culture. And in the process, we're going to brainwash them all that this is a great thing to collect and do. You can see that our building across the bottom, all those windows are going to have huge postage stamps in them. And at night, we light them up so that this building will become a go-to destination in the city. People will come to photograph these windows, and then the kids are going to say, let's go in that museum tomorrow and see what's on the inside. That's our goal. Bring them in. Next. So I just, this is kind of hard to see, this lighting isn't dim enough, but I photographed one of all of our favorites, the Statue of Freedom head stamp, and through the window, you can see the trees, and what you can't see so clearly here is the actual Statue of Freedom is there. Shows up better on my computer than it does on the screen. But those windows will be just smashing. Next. When we first put up a national collection before World War I at the Smithsonian in the Arts and Industries building, we had special pull-out frames made based on what they have in the British Library. That system of protecting stamps from light and making it accessible works, still works. Next. And after they left that building, they went to the American History Museum in a much more boring looking format. Next. But they also put stamps out, special stories and displays. So I want you to get a feel for how stamps have looked in our museums over the years. Next. This is going to be what the National Collection is going to look like when we open September 22nd. We've spent $1 million to have new state-of-the-art pull-out frames designed. They are absolutely sensational for both the staff and the viewer. But more than that, we have over 800 individually designed panels for the objects to go on with the text and design to make this appealing, so that when non-collectors walk in and they see an index and they see, oh, Civil War, I care about the Civil War, and they go and they pull out the Civil War and they learn things they've never known before when they've spent most of their life reading about the Civil War. This is how we're going to grab these people. We have stories to tell that are going to knock their socks off. Next. And then this is just an example of what some of these pages will look like. Next. But, I mean, it's not just pull-out frames in this gallery. That's just one part of it. We are, for the first time, going to have an inverted Jenny on full-time permanent view. We can do this because we can now control light and environment enough to do that. Thanks to Bill Gross, who's going to loan us a block of 4. We'll have a very showy piece to put on. But we'll also have a film with it. We'll have other great rarities with it. We're going to have interactives where you can go and pull designs in to create your own collection of stamps and email it to yourself or friends, where you can design a stamp, where you can learn about the life of Amelia Earhart and see mail from her own collection, where you can examine revenue stamps and learn how they made a difference in the Civil War. We're going to have QR codes so you can get stuff down on your mobile device. 60% of Americans already carry a mobile device, and it's just growing fast. We have to talk to the next generations in their languages, and that's part of how we're doing it. It's part of that visual culture. They're not going to get excited unless they've got those visuals bombarded. Next. So, what would John Tiffany say if he saw all this? What if he was standing here instead of me? Well, I think first of all he'd say, I can't believe there's 121 people who paid money to come to a dinner in my name and are wearing little lapel pins with my name and have all given money for a library, and the people in this room are like the movers and shakers. You're like the great collectors, the great writers, the great auctioneers and dealers, everything. I mean, this room really is the top. How fun, how thrilling it would be for him to come and mingle with this group. Next. And to realize that what this benefit is about is creating the world's greatest philatelic library, a resource that everybody can use and will have what they need to take things to the next step. Building on the continuity of leaders like him, we don't just invent what we do. We have built on a long tradition, and I think it's incredibly wonderful that we even can recite the names of all these collectors from 100 years ago. It's part of our own heritage, and we love it, and it continues to grow. Next. And it's all about embracing the future and embracing change that's going to make that future. We have to embrace the technology. I think our hobby is incredibly good at doing that, but I think we have to not just embrace it for ourselves, we have to embrace it to reach out to new people, new audiences, new generations, and we have to think smart about how we do that. We need to sell a brand image of how wonderful this hobby is and rewarding. We have to work harder at that. Next. So in fact, if John Tiffany could be here, he'd say, get me on that time machine and take me to the golden age, because the golden age is right now, 2013, and I'm happy to share it with you. Thank you very much.
That is the definition of special. Thank you, Cheryl. Next, I would like to ask Roger Brody, the president of the American Philatelic Research Library, and Tara Murray, the librarian, to come up and make some awards.
As most of you know, members who donate $1,000 or more within 4 calendar years are recognized as Tiffany donors and continue with this distinction as long as they continue to give the Society or the library an average of $250 per calendar year. This evening we wish to acknowledge and thank those members for their generous support both of the Society and the library. Since January 1st of 2012, 104 APS members have joined more than 750 others previously recognized as Tiffany donors. You will find in our literature this evening the names of the 104. If anyone wishes to count, you won't be invited back to the next dinner. I think it's 100. This evening, I'd like to ask the following Tiffany donors to come up and receive recognition and their Tiffany lapel pins. The American Helvetia Philatelic Society, I feel like we have the awards, accepting the award will be Bruce Marsden. Gordon Eubanks. Like Santos. John Fagan. John Nicholson. John Fagan. Larry T. Nix, unfortunately, Larry could not join us this evening. His wife is taken ill. James Pullen. James, are you here? There he is. Robert Roof. James Wagan. Mitchell Zeiss. The names I have read are those that we expected to join the dinner this evening. If there's anyone else who's here that didn't call, don't be bashful, please stand up and be recognized. Hearing none, I'm going to turn the remainder of this over to Tara.
Members who donate $5,000 within a 5-year period are recognized as Vooys Fellows. A Vooys Fellow may run for the founder-patron representative on the APRL Board of Trustees. The fellowship is named in honor of Daniel W. Vooys, recognized as the founder of the library in 1968. This evening, we would like to recognize 2 new Vooys Fellows and ask them to come forward to receive their Vooys plaques. First, we would like to recognize Alan Warren. And next, we would like to recognize Edward Jarvis.
In the early days of TV, there was a beer commercial that may be familiar with Milwaukee. It was Schlitz beer, the beer that made Milwaukee famous. For those who are not aware, the APRL recently signed a lease agreement with a new tenant for the American Philatelic Center. It is the Nittany Valley Distillery LLC. So hopefully this time next year, Nittany Brew will be the beer that made Belfont famous. Thank you all.
Thank Thank you, Tara and Roger. These are my gloves for the cold weather. Next, I would like to talk about, actually, I would like to introduce somebody too, but I'd like to introduce Johnny Klug to come up and talk about a program that we started at the National Postal Museum. It was incubated there, and then the APS has taken over this program and has been running with it now for a couple of years. And it's called Stamps Teach. Johnny, would you come up, please?
For my first number, I shall say. You were expecting that, weren't you? First of all, I need to give another round of applause to my sister there. Sis. Cheryl and I are mistaken for one another periodically. We are not related, but we call each other sister for that very reason. And it's kind of funny. We have some interesting stories to tell sometimes. Stamps Teach. About 2 years ago, the Smithsonian National Postal Museum Council of Philatelist New Initiatives Committee, that's a lot, we were having a brainstorming session. And the topic was, how do we get more people involved in stamp collecting? And so, ideas were coming out, and all of a sudden, and I think he's sitting right over there, Omar Rodriguez says, we should have stamps in every classroom in the United States. Well, I was chairing this meeting, and my heart starts going about 5 million, pit-pat, 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 like that. And I never wanted to discourage anybody from any idea, because some of the greatest ideas in the world for stamp collecting have come out of that committee. Things like a congressional stamp exhibit. If I'd have said, gee, that's never going to work, we would have never had this great program. So there's Omar, and he's so charming and so cute. And he's saying, we should have stamps in every classroom. I'm sitting there thinking, well, that's actually a very good idea. But how in the world are we going to make this happen? So instead of discouraging somebody, we started thinking about how are we going to make this happen? And Omar agreed to chair a committee, and we formed a small committee, and we contacted APS. And APS says, yes, they were interested in helping as well. And so we put together the bones of a program that would, it would be started off as a pilot program, start small, go big. And so we started off with 100 teachers, and we presented them with a bag of stamps so that the kids would be able to actually work with the stamps. How many people here actually learn geography and world cultures and things like that from their stamp collection? I don't really have to say any more than that, do I? Working with stamps, you learn all kinds of inventive, interesting, and important things about countries all over the world. So we had 100 teachers in our first pilot, and we did a second pilot and had another 120 teachers or so. And the feedback that we got from them was nothing short of astounding. We also got feedback from the students, and they were excited about having stamps in their classroom and learning from them and using them in lesson plans and so forth. So we've got to now figure out a way to make stamps happen in more classrooms until we get them into every classroom, so that the kids can have the same joy of learning from stamps as we did. Fortunately, Omar over there was able to land us a matching grant with a foundation called the Turning Point Foundation, but it's a matching grant. And we have the opportunity of having $25,000 from them if we can raise $25,000 from collectors. So that's where we are right now. We need $25,000 in order to get this matching grant. And so I am asking if you can remember learning from your stamp collection and how important it is for other children all over the United States to learn from their stamp collection. Maybe you can dig down a little bit and help us make that matching grant. And that's it, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Janet, for that wonderful story. You talked about what is an exceptional chance to get stamps back into the schools. Quite some time ago, we were in the schools, along with the post office department, with a thing called Ben Franklin Stamp Clubs. We worked on that for many, many years. It disappeared at some point. We really have been struggling since then to get back into the schools. And this looks like it's the way to do it. It's a great opportunity for us, but as you heard, if we don't come up with $25,000 within the next couple of months, we're going to lose part of that matching grant. I'm happy to tell you this evening that to start off this program of raising this $25,000, Wade Sadi has given the first donation of $5,000. We are going to make it easy for all of you to donate to this program tonight. In your packet of materials that you have in front of you, there is an envelope with a cachet on it that says Stamps Teach, and along with it, a form that you can use to fill out and make a donation to this program. We would like each and every one of you to give something, whatever you feel you can give. We'd love to have this tonight, but you can also take it with you and send it back to us in this envelope. Along with filling this out, we'll take cash, checks, credit cards. Information is on here for credit card donations. So if you'd like to donate this evening so you don't forget about it, if you could just fill this out, put your donation in the envelope, and give it to Ken. You're going to collect them in the back. Give them to Ken on the way out, and we'd really be in love with you forever. It's a great program. It really, really is. So thank you, and we thank you in advance for your help in matching this $25,000. Thank you.
Steve Reinhardt, who just spoke, is not only the incoming APS president, but he spent his entire life in education. So if he thinks it's a good idea, then it probably is. Or you'll get a failing grade.